Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the session about SDC, extract, and pre-populate, given by Brian. Yeah, let's just kick it off and take it away, Brian.
Thank you very much. And audio check, perfect. I can hear myself, so that's great. Hopefully you can hear me too. So I'm going to dive straight in. Who am I? Brian Postlethwaite. I'm a senior software engineer at Microsoft Research. I'm a co-chair at HL7 International's patient admin, FHIR admin, a whole heap of stuff, and a contributor on the .NET SDK. And I've been an implementer of SDC for a very long time and working with FHIR for not quite 10 years, but we're getting very close. So I was planning right up until Simone gave that awesome talk last night. So hopefully there's at least some people that saw Simone's presentation of we should have done questionnaires. And so I had a look at the survey that I asked you guys to fill out to say, what level do you know? What do you want to dive into? And I thought, well, actually, I'm going to spend more time on the recap of FHIR questionnaires and structured data capture and dive in and do more demos rather than right in the weeds of populate and extract. But I will still go through those. So if you came for that, great, you'll still get to see it. You'll get to see it in action more. So if you're not here to see this, well, come and enjoy anyway. So starting off with the recap, we've really got FHIR questionnaires sort of have four basic resources or three key resources in FHIR that it all comes from. The questionnaire right in the middle is where we have all the definition. So what does the form structure look like? What fields are in there? What layout do we have? What rules there are? And can reference off into terminologies, so which is throughout to value sets and code systems beyond. So we link that in. And then once someone wants to come and interact and record their information, the results of that come out into the questionnaire response resource. So that's really cool. And its structure mirrors the questionnaire items. So inside a questionnaire, if you've been and had a look, it has item, which can have items, which can have items. It's a big nested tree structure if you need that. And the questionnaire response has to match that. And there's extensions, operations, profiles, and implementation guides. And specifically the SDC or structured data capture is the keys to the kingdom. So if you want to do something good, have a look in the structured data capture. That's where all the real meat of surveys and questionnaires and assessments is. And yeah, really get that level of granularity. And one of the questions I get quite often is, we're going to create a profile on questionnaire because we want to create this some specific survey. And I go, well, no, that's not the point of questionnaires. We don't profile them. You'll create the questionnaire with all your questions in it. So the only reason you might want to create a profile on questionnaire itself is if I was an organization and said, well, we don't use these other parts of the spec just so that you can validate that when you produce questionnaires, you don't violate stuff that you don't do. So typically, if you're creating a form or an assessment, it's questionnaire, not profile. Excellent. So this is all of the different types. So I'm not going to just sit there and read through all of that because you'll all be asleep and that's kind of pointless. But it was just to give you an idea of that there is a rich model of the question types that you can have and what data comes out of that, and then representations of what sort of things that fills into. So you can see here we've got choice types, which could be a value coding, and they can draw from a list of options, which can be value sets. And then you can have customizations to say, well, this particular choice option has radio buttons or checkboxes or combo boxes or autocomplete. So it's really the questionnaire gives you not just the data type that you're looking at, but advice on how a renderer should go and draw that particular thing. So which is cool. And since I've just talked about terminologies a little bit, but let's dive into it a little bit more. For the purposes of this talk, I'm going to be focusing on R4. There are some changes that went into R5 that look different to this. So yeah, we'll just say that this is R4 and that's where SDC focuses and that's where all the implementation is at right now. So we'll keep concentrating on that. So we've got choice and open choice. The difference between them is open choice. You can then not only pick from a list, but you can also just answer in free text. So if you have something that you need to look up, or it can be flexible, you don't have to pick, that's a great option. They're referenced into a value set using the canonical. So that then allows you to use the $expand in the terminology service to populate out that content. And then when there's also the answer options. So if you're not using a value set, you can just put the straight codings in there. So if they're not being reused anywhere else, and it's just for this one particular form that I want 3 values for, but I'm never going to use anywhere else, I can just plug them straight into the questionnaire itself. Whether it's repeating, we have those capacities, and control selections. So radio buttons, combos, checkboxes, autocomplete. So what's an autocomplete? It's basically your free text box where you start typing into it and then that'll go and hit the terminology service or whatever in the background. And so I type AU and it goes, well, that could be Australia, Austria, or other places. So that's the whole idea there. And yeah, when you're doing your form design, be considerate to the user who's going to end up rendering this or interacting with it. Don't give them a combo box with 100,000 entries. Don't give them radio buttons that have got 100,000 entries. So make sure that you do that selection that is appropriate. Cool. And then we've got the extensions. So item control is the extension that drives which user interface element is appropriate. And preferred terminology server. So if I've got a specific terminology server that I need to run for a specific question, I can embed that within the definition as well. Cool. And yeah, uses the expand. So a little bit about managing questionnaires. So they're referenced from the questionnaire response into the questionnaire, not through a reference, but through a canonical reference. And along with that comes our little magic version value. And so that links into the version, the business version or the canonical version of that form. So on a form server, I can actually have the same form or the same canonical there multiple times. So I can have the historic versions, so which isn't a FHIR instance version, which we also have those. So if I can see this list here. So those are the instance versions, but we also have the canonical version so that I can know that this particular form definition was answered against this one, even though it's retired. So when I'm going and picking a new one, it'll come from the current one, which in this screenshot has no version, which is, yeah, not great, but that's what's active. And so normally that you would find that the active should be 0.04. So, yep, and recommend really only one active one, but you can have multiple active. Cool. So just a little bit on dynamic behaviors. So a form can have lots of dynamic behaviors, and the one I'm focusing on here is enable when. So you can define that one particular question should be enabled or disabled if the value of another question has a specific value. And that's really cool when you're going through and say, I've got a large form, which has got 100 values, and 25 of them are only valid if you happen to be a child, And so you might have an enable when on the age to actually filter out and hide all of those values in that group, so that it makes it a lot easier for the display, which is really cool. So instead of boring you with more slides, I thought we'll jump in and we'll actually have a look at some demos. So live demos, should have refreshed all of this before I came. So the tool I'm going to use, so this is the Smart Launcher. And I'm going to be launching, so the CSIRO in Australia have been building an open source SDC implementation. And so that's what I'm going to show, which is kind of cool. So we can launch and open that. And get out of the way. And so it's going to need me to log in. Excellent. And I'm going to pick a patient. And so now this launches in. And so now we've got the context of a patient, the context of a practitioner, and I'm going to go and grab a form. So here's our bit of everything. I'm going to go and create a response. And we can see here's a questionnaire that's being rendered that has a string. That's not coming, it's not showing very well, but there's boxes here. So I can see that's a short version. So it's a string. This is a memo. So you can grab chunks of text, booleans, dates and times, integers, decimals. There's some stuff that this particular renderer doesn't support. So it still comes through and I can see those and it's telling me, yeah, I don't support that. We've got some radio buttons. We've got some drop downs and some look aheads. So yeah, that's kind of cool. So let's have a look at the same sort of thing. So this is another test host that I can get at and try the same sort of thing. So a bit of everything. So this is the same form definition that's being rendered with two different renderers, as he hopes everything comes up. Yep, beautiful. So this one we can see there's our string single line, our large box, text times integers. So decimal, we notice that this one has the meters showing beside it because that particular question has what units match up with that decimal. So we can attribute that, canonicals, references. So these three types and attachments and unknown, so quantities. So this renderer has implemented URLs, references, and attachments, which the other one hadn't, but it hasn't implemented quantity, which the other one hadn't either. But once again, we've got options. And interestingly, this one has a capacity to do some horizontal, some vertical, whereas this one, it's actually defaulted and say, well, we support drop downs. We're not supporting that other extended option. And same here. So drop down, New South Wales, AU, and slowly it comes back. There we go, Australia and AU, and that comes through. So if I look at Augsburg, which is not a country, or Augsburg. So one of those is an autocomplete and one's auto choice. And if I go save, we note that one of them has said, no, that's not valid, you can't do that. And the other one, because it supports open choice, it says that's perfectly fine. So that shows you that sort of capacity. So that's the bit of everything. I'm going to go back up. And we're going to do another one. So what did I have in my slides? I had groups, terminology. Let's have a quick look at terminology. Answer expression, demonstrating various ways. So I created this specific questionnaire to verify all of the different ways that you can embed a terminology into a questionnaire. And so we can say, yep, so here we go. We've got three options for coding. So English USA, Australian, and Australian Bogan. So if you're Australian, you probably know what that is. Otherwise, in joke. And yeah, so we get, so there's our different varieties coming from different places. So you can have value sets referenced without a version specified. You can have value sets specified with a version specified. So why would you put a version? So you need a specific version of SNOMED reference, you can do that. Or there's this one is reading from the patient that was launched in context. So it said on that patient, he had English as his language. So if I'd had 2 languages in that patient, both of those would have turned up here. So I can create a form that's going to read not just data from a terminology, it can read it from parts of the clinical record that you've brought in. So that's really cool. And I could go back and do the same thing on this one. But I won't. So we'll go back. And what else did I have on my list? Enable when, so back to those enable when, so I'll do that from this one. So why not? So we can go enable when tests. And so this is a test where it actually goes and checks all of the various enable when options. So I can say Boolean field, ticket, and so that field only shows when it's there. Those ones show when it's not. 4.5, he says. Okay, I've guessed the numbers wrong. Yep, so that shows where it's greater than 4. So we go back to 3, disappears. So it's all pretty cool. Even stuff like these multi-choice, I can tick a box, A, so that one shows, and C. So A doesn't matter what it is, but this last one needs B and C. So if I tick that off, they both go away. So it's not just on one value, you can have multiple values. And there's also an expression option, which I don't even remember if I implemented. No. So that should work. But so that gives you a good, strong idea of how that stuff fits in. And where's my demo set? And, yep. So let's go have a look from this one. So we've got, so this is the Abbey Pain scale. So looking at more dynamic behaviors. So a lot of forms have options which have weighted values associated with them to create some form of a score. So what do we do there? So I can go and tick off and say, oh, I've got mild vocalization. I have severe facial expressions. Change in body language, sure. And if I look down here, I can see here's this 6 value. I'm hoping you can't see that if I have it right down the bottom. See this 6 value? So let me zoom in a little. So that 6, every time I'm answering a question, it's live updating that value. So that's associated with the scoring that's associated with each of these questions. So yeah, so that shows that level of capacity. So if I go and do the same thing over here, at the pain scale. So same sort of thing, but this particular one is able to render the horizontal rows. So it's nice and easy to look at. And go, yep, there goes those numbers going up. And you also note that this one has the total pain score is actually a range that's calculated based on the score. So if you've got mostly sort of absent or mild, it gives you moderate. And so it sort of brings that down. So you can chain that sort of calculation. So that's very cool. All right, so that was some good demos. So on to renderers, so a little bit more slides, and then I'll go back to some more demos again. So these slides will be available after, so take photos, enjoy. But yeah, so there's quite a few open source ones. So the Lister Hill National CBC, so US NLM, so they've got their particular L forms. There's another one, questionnaire kit, quite a few. So Firefly. So yeah, so the National Library of Medicine's in JavaScript. The Firefly is in Flutter. I can't remember what Kenneth Myra's implementation was in. And then the Smart Forms from CSIR Australia. That's the one I've just been demonstrating. And that's open source and that's in React. So if you want to get in and contribute, highly encourage that. So there's also commercial tech demos from Nurse IT and Telstra Health, which is the other one I was just showing. And then here's a whole bunch of other GitHub repos that have got similar content. And a new addition is the Google Android stuff. So Jin, if you're here somewhere, yep. So they've got that going on. There's this link, FHIR SDC implementations. If you do one, add it in here. There's also builders, so not just renderers, but builders. And so we can see that USNLM has a form builder, Graham has one, I have one that's sort of a bit of in progress. It's been sort of sitting on the shelf for a little while, and then there's a few others. And text editors are also an option, as is doing conversions from your internal content. And if you've got internal forms and you need to get there, I highly recommend giving it a crack. Grab your internal definition and then have a go at just creating a mapping into the FHIR questionnaire and SDC format. And you'll be surprised how much of your internal stuff is actually met by SDC. I've done it on 4 systems in my previous job, and with very few exceptions, there was almost nothing that wasn't already covered by FHIR. And then there was a whole bunch of stuff that the FHIR SDC could do that the original stuff couldn't, or not without having some custom JavaScript, which is, very fragile and certainly not portable. And some more tooling. So go have a look at those. I'll grab them from the deck. There's some TypeScript and some .NET stuff, and a .NET validator. And if you're doing FhirPath expressions, for some of the other that we've got coming up, there's the FhirPath lab, which helps work and debug and test those expressions. I might show that at the end. So that's the background on where things are at. So now I'll jump into pre-population and cut through that side. And so to perform pre-population, we need a context or a source. Where's this information coming from? We need a mapping to say what to do with it, or where to put it in the questionnaire. We need an engine that's going to process that stuff. And then we also need knowledge of that source structure, where it's coming from, so we can do all that. From an execution point of view, so the SDC spec defines the $populate operation, which you can call and pass it the context. So that Smart on Fire app that you saw me working from the CSIRO, that was doing the $populate, but it was implementing it in browser. So whether that's being done in browser, in the app that's the web app, or it's calling out to an external service, you can do either way. So there's no real issue there. So we've got observation-based, FhirPath-based, and StructureMap-based. So, and each of those has, they have increasing levels of flexibility. So if you've got basic observations and that's all you care about coming in to pre-populate from, it's really light in terms of what you need to do to the resource. And so therefore it is easy to do and it's easy to execute. So really all it needs is an extension for the observation link period to say how far back into the medical record for patient Brian do I need to go when I'm looking for observations. So that is the flag that says, please go and do a pre-pop with the observation technique. And then you look at the item.code for the actual SNOMED value for that observation. And so that's as tough as it goes. There, you can do some stuff where if you've got a link code like this, which is birth date, that you could go back to patient and birth date, but you could. So this is what one looks like, observation link period. And so we can see here, there's our look back 3 months. And these are the LOINC codes that could come from. And then it actually says, so the renderer or the pre-pop engine might actually execute, and this could be the query that it creates to execute. 10 minutes, wow, that went fast. So yeah, so they're now FhirPath based. So similar, we pass it an extension context and then an item context and an initial expression. So instead of gabbing on more about that, I'm going to go and do a quick demo. So yep. And we'll go to this one I'm going to click on and cross my fingers. So this is now doing that pre-pop exercise. And so I obviously haven't entered any information in, but it's reached into the record and put in is a date value. So it's grabbed the current date. So that's a pre-pop. It's grabbed the name. And you'll note there that that's the given name and family name concatenated. So with the FhirPath expression, you can join that stuff together and produce it. So the age is being calculated off the date of birth and it's pulled a heap of stuff. So medical history, it's gone and grabbed. So that list there. So where did that list come from? That came from that patient's condition list. And so it's brought them in as the options. And so now I can go through as the enter and go, yeah, that one, that one, that one, that one, and this one. So they're the ones I want to select off and send with it. And so here's another set. So other ones. So this is some other content. If I don't want that, just remove these ones. They're not relevant for where I'm sending. And here is the medical history and current problem list. So we can see that same sort of thing. And you notice that this is a table. So we can not just have a simple list of questions, we can have tables and groups and repeating sections. So which is awesome. So what does that look like on the inside? So I will check. Actually, I won't jump into that. So conversion, so on the other side, on the way out. So observation extract. So here is a particular one of these questionnaires. So we can go in, I can enter in the data. So this is actually grab some existing content. With that, I can go save. So that's saving and writes out that record. I can click in, which is my record. I can now go extract. And now that's created a bundle, which has got that observation, that weight, and there's our 89.3 that we had. So that's based on that same simple set of definitions that we had. So I'm going to go back. And so that was just using this simple questionnaire, which has that variable. So I can zoom in. So variables, so we can say this particular variable reads that question. This particular variable reads that question. And then down in the calculations, so you can see here's our observation link. So go back and look up. Then we've got a tag to say observation extract, pull that one out. And so that extension is what drew it or indicated to the extract routine to go and create an observation out of that component. So that's really cool. So I'm going to step over onto the next part. So our final option there, we go back to slides. So is the StructureMap approach. So Vadim had a session earlier today on the StructureMap language. And so just to show what does that look like. So we'll go to our expression. So in our questionnaire, we include a reference to, so here's our target structure definition. So that says we want you to go and target structure map is this specific structure map, which is a nice big long one. So I will go and enter in something quick and say never true, on no risk, save another one. We can go click, come throughout into that. And so here's our answers where we've got never true, we worried, never true, never no risk. Awesome. And we can go to our extract, which calls that $extract, which you can't really see, but that's what's up in the corner. And so that's produced out. Here's our observation. Cool. We could have done observations using that observation technique. But along with that, there's a few extra properties that this particular map has added in. It's added this specific coding into that content, which is excellent. And then I come down further and another observation, and another observation. So there's that LOINC code. And then what's different here, and another one. And you can create more than just observations. So you could create, so the actual map, which looks like this, will be able to create conditions as well. So it doesn't have to just create observations. You can create conditions, allergies, even an actual patient resource if you really want to. So that's the flexibility of doing that capacity. And so this is that same structure map. So this is one of the testing tools. And we can go to our map engine. And what else do we have? So I could change this to say, instead of coming out with the results, if I look at the top here, has an ID of that vital sign. I can create that with transactions, just so you can see something happens. And map. And he crosses his fingers and hopes the demo gods have been happy with him. And there we go. Yes, that's produced some invalid content, but that's the whole point. You can create any structure you like with a structure map. And so, yes, you should create valid stuff, but there we go. So what did you learn? FHIR questionnaires and structured data capture is awesome. But seriously, it's advanced rendering capabilities, pre-population to speed up that data entry, and data extract into other resources for more uses. So the cool part with that pre-population, yes, it speeds up the data entry. It can reach into the clinical record, grab that data. But if your system that you're launching from doesn't support a bit of data that it's asking for, it doesn't really matter, because the user can still go and enter that in and they'll be able to submit it, and the other end will get it, even though that your source system didn't have it. So it is a really cool tool. So that's who I am. That's where you can get me. Find me on FHIR chat all the time. And Q&A. Any questions?
Yes, thanks, Brian. I do have one question registered on Whova, but
Yep.
if there's any questions here, we can start out with the audience.
Down the front to you.
Oh, yeah.
He's making you walk.
Have you bumped into any limitations or ambiguity in the SDC spec? Like, for example, enable when expressions or calculated expressions that are transitive and depend on each other, and, you know, the order in which you evaluate that, or anything like that?
Yep. So the question was, does the order matter? And the answer is yes. Do you have ones like that one I was demoing, had one question with the options where you were selecting them and it was creating a score, and then there was another one underneath which then used that score as with bands to produce another value. So yes, that sort of stuff does happen. And so hopefully the renders that implement that will track that sort of tracing. So that's one. It can.
Okay. Yep.
So yeah, so that's up to the renderers. Yeah, so one of them was doing it that I was just showing there. The other one wasn't doing it. I think the LH Forms does as well, but not sure. Yep.
Can you give an example of the limitations you encounter when using only the FhirPath extraction, and when you should move to the StructureMap exception?
From a data extract or from a pre-pop?
Extract.
From a data extract. So from a data extract, you can use the FhirPath extraction. So 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 you can use the FhirPa So with the extract, there's really the, what have I got there? So there's observation-based, definition-based, and structure-mapped-based. So there currently isn't a FhirPath technique.
Sorry, I mean the definition-based extraction. When do you
I
notice?
skipped over the definition one. But yeah, like with the extract side, the definition approach that is documented, there's only one implementation that I did a long time ago, which is unfortunately not open source with my former employer. And it's not as obvious. And you really have to structure your questionnaire with the target in mind, because you can't do things like there's one field, which is the name, that I need to put into two fields, or the other way around. I've got two fields and I need to put into one. You can't do that with the definition approach. There is another proposal going around for a template-based extract, but yeah, that hasn't bubbled through the surface yet. Cool.
So let's do the one from Hua first, so they don't feel neglected back home.
Yep.
So this one contains 4 question marks, so bear with me, please. Is there a recommended way to implement multi-language questionnaires? Would it be an instance per language or via language extension? And this one contains a follow-up as well based on your answer in this one.
Yep. So that's an area that's under current active development right now. So you could define them as multiple instances of the same, multiple questionnaire definitions, or you could have one questionnaire definition that has each of the languages embedded in it. And the other stuff that's going around is a translation option or operation. I can't remember what it's being proposed to be called, which would then take your accept header and then spit out the appropriate content.
Yeah, so to follow up on that one, if I understood it correctly, you mentioned the instance per language. How to secure structure integrity in between the instances? How would you do that?
With great care. Yeah, so that is there's nothing specific about that at the moment.
Yeah, thanks. So back to the audience. Any more questions?
Over in the left. Yeah.
Are there any limitations to the conditions you can place on questions or possible answers, such as a combination of conditions or?
So as in validation?
Not validation, rather, do I show this question?
Yeah, so you saw the enable when stuff. So that was just with the simple. So if I go back, so that's the simple approach. We can go field A, field B, blah, or you could have a set of questions which is included, and then you've got the enable behavior, which is all or any. And so if that doesn't get your functionality, there's an answer expression, not an enable expression. I've probably got the name wrong, but which basically gives you a capacity to write a FhirPath expression to say, whenever this expression is true, show the data or don't. So yeah, simple and then more complex. Yeah.
Any more? Behind the pillars, maybe? I don't see them.
Awesome.
Back there. Gotta run again.
Hey.
Hey, maybe a primitive question, but you mentioned that do not profile questionnaires except you do not want to test the conformance to the questionnaire itself. What do you mean by creating a questionnaire without an existing profile? Like for example, I have a RedCap questionnaire and I would like to make a questionnaire out of FhIR and would like to create questionnaire responses. Don't I need a profile to set the questionnaires inside so I can have just an instance of a question?
Yep, just an instance of the questionnaire. So I can take my RedCap questionnaire or internal survey format, whatever it is, I'll produce from that, not a profile, I'll produce a FhIR questionnaire instance.
Mhm.
And so I put that on my server or whatever it is. And so then when I take my renderer and pull back that questionnaire definition, I know how to render it. It does all its behaviors, clicks save, sends it back to the server. The server goes, I've got that FHIR questionnaire definition, and it goes through and says, okay, link IDs, they all match, questions, data types, they all match, and checks it out. So the profile doesn't enter into it at that point.
Which means the profile is the profile that's already been defined as the base questionnaire
So
profile,
yeah,
right?
so
Yeah.
yeah, you might include a profile for a questionnaire if you wanted to say, we don't want anyone creating forms on this server that have embedded terminology.
Yeah.
So that would be a valid use of a profile to try and constrain out and say, we don't support that functionality, so don't let them come in. But yeah, so that's not creating a new questionnaire. It's just creating a restriction for those submitting questionnaires that could be used because of their internal rendering engine.
Perfect. Thank
Yep.
you very much.
Great.
So any more? We still have some time. Back there again.
Hey, get those step counts up. Yeah, what's mine at? Whew.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. Maybe an exotic one regarding the enable when. Are you able to actually query underlying data in order to make an evaluation whether you want to show a particular question? So let me give you an example. Let's say you ask for a patient weight and you only want to show the question when this patient had a particular condition.
Yes is the answer. So just to cut through, you'd probably include a variable. So in the form. So one, it could be coming through on the pre-pop. So if you included that as one of the conditions that comes in and it was already a question in the questionnaire, then tick, you've already got that covered because you can just tap into another question. But the use of variables, you can have a FHIR query. And so that would then execute to go and make that call out to somewhere else and grab the results of that, shove it into that variable. And then with your enable when expression, you can then check that variable. Does that cover what you're after? Yeah.
Any more?
So actually, I wonder, I can probably even show not a demo, but at least a form that has that. This is big font.
Do I wait for them?
So enable when tests. So JSON for those people, expression. Yep, so there's an example of a value expression. So there's our enable when expression. It says when that's happening. So this is a text FhirPath to go and execute. And so accessing in this particular case, the % resource dot blah, 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 blah. So instead that would be % condition that you pulled down with a FHIR query. And yeah, so I just happened to concatenate those two things with an and. So, which is kind of cool. And then tested it to make sure it was equal to chicken, because you know, that's fun. Cool.
Yeah, I have an additional question on the expressions here. I wanted to build an expression which evaluated a numerical answer, like greater than or smaller than, and based on that, Boolean expression, I want to return a coding. Like in my FhirPath expression, I want to create a coding. Is that possible? I didn't find like a good example of that.
Let me go to the syncs. Yes is the answer.
Cool.
Just trying to think where that is. Pre-pop. I had one of them lined up in my demos. Pre-pop test, that one. Is it loading? So what was the question again?
So create a coding based on a evaluation and expression.
So this particular question, so gender, if we go up here, so it's got given name, so it's your normal patient demographics. and I've got a gender property, which is a choice. So I need to pull that in. And so reading that out. So yeah, that's a choice coming. Oh, sorry, let me zoom in so people can see. So yeah, it's reading from that particular terminology. So I can go and enter it. And from the pre-pop perspective, he goes down and I can see I'm just straight out saying, select that gender value, even though that's a code in the data item. So if I took that, and let's go to FhirPath Lab. So FhirPath Lab, awesome testing tool, self-plug, and put that in here. And so let's see, what does that return? Variables, okay, so we need a variable, patient example, download that. So now I've got a patient loaded up into that. So like the initial expression, so I can now run that as a test, and I can see that's come out as just male as a string. But what the renderers will do is they'll go, well, this is a string value. They'll look into that set of options that's valid for it. And provided that there isn't a clash, that you've got two codes in that set of results that come back, it'll accurately go and pick that one.
So the string gets mapped on the one of the available codes.
Yep. Okay. So it would look at it and go, yeah, I know which one you're after, and put that straight in. So LH Forms, it's on its backlog at the moment, but yeah, that's moving rapidly to the top. Otherwise, you can just reach into, instead of that, you could reach into the % questionnaire, .item, .answers, where code equals the value you've got. That makes sense? Perfect.
Yeah, so I'm afraid we got to wrap this up now. Thanks for the questions. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being here and have a good one.